Hey there, folks. This is Anuj back again with our final panel for the SGDA Summit, the design panel. There we go. I can hear everything. Uh, I'm the webmaster of SGDA, recent graduate from USC, and I'd like to introduce our game design fireside chat panelists. Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself, give a brief introduction of what you do, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Scott Rudi. I'm a design director at Respawn Entertainment, which of course is a subsidiary of Electronic Arts, the same people that bring you Apex Legends and previously Titanfall 1 and 2.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming by and having this chat with us.
Of course.
For our first question, I'd like to ask, being able to play and or look at a game and immediately break down the player experience is an essential skill of a designer. How did you build the skill, and what was most effective in your learning and building of this skill?
I think, I mean, first off, it's kind of a curse. Once you actually start doing this for a living, actually just sitting and enjoying a game, you have to kind of actively not be breaking it down. But like you said, it is essential for a designer, especially if you're looking at competitive titles or making a game that is in the realm of something that you're not quite familiar with. You need to play a lot of those kind of games. And I think one of the most important tools you can have is a game journal, where you basically, after each session, write down, your emotions, write down what was confusing, what you enjoyed, and why, just as a player. And then I also like to I think they're setting up this kind of loop. So I would expect in future play sessions to see these kind of behaviors or requests or something. And so really, this is a skill that takes a long time to build up. You will not do it well, but that's fine. Give yourself a break. But try to have the discipline of writing down a couple paragraphs of what you thought about your last session through the lens of a game designer. What rules are your experiences? What motivations were you given? And other kinds of things like that.
I definitely feel that in terms of like once you open that bottle, it's hard to put it back in
Hmm.
because I'll play games nowadays and just be like, I'll think about them analytically and be like, I'm not having as much fun. It's not a
Yes.
problem because I like making games, but I'll just be like, my friends will be like talking about this game for hours, and I'll be like, "It's cool. I have opinions on it."
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really hard not to be always looking under the hood and stuff. And, when you should be just enjoying the drive. But, it partially, I think game design does that to people. And also people, game design attracts a certain kind of people who will want to analyze that anyway. And so
Exactly.
it goes together.
It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way.
Correct.
Awesome. For our next question, I'd like to ask, say there's an entry-level design position, level, technical, UI, etc. What are some core skills that you would want to see in the portfolio to know that they can do the job, especially
Mm,
coming from students who might not have this professional experience?
sure. I think we're moving into an era, and I think a lot of you have probably noticed there's not a lot of entry level jobs anymore. At least much less than back in the day, 5, 10, even 20 years ago. I would say it really the trade-off, and I think it's a positive trade-off, is that 5, 10, 20 years ago, access to full game engines was extremely limited. You could not
Mhm.
build your own game. You just couldn't.
Yeah.
You'd have to work somewhere to get that experience. And when somebody asked me how did they get in the games industry, I told them, well, start by making games. And it usually just melts their brain immediately. But I think anyone watching this has probably been to a game jam or two. And guess what? You are using a free engine. You're trying stuff out. You've got way less time than you think you need, which is game development in general. Little
Yeah.
teaser
That's
right
a
there for
familiar.
you.
That's a
And
familiar
so
statements.
yeah, nothing's between you and making games right now. And platforms like itch.io and this kind of stuff also means that you can put those games out for others to enjoy or critique and stuff like that. That is experience. I view that as industry experience. If you've been through those loops, if you have created things and put it in front of other people, I think for me, that's as legit as a job in the industry for money, right? And so just do that. Go to IDGA functions and network and stuff like that. But certainly make games, make games, make games. Now, as far as skill based, it really depends on your discipline. The one thing that we do see lacking with a lot of people is the soft skills,
Hmm.
especially with the general trend towards return to office, which I have mixed feelings about. But working well with others in a team environment is essential. And you have a lot of people that if you have a superstar and somebody who's, maybe better than average, and the superstar is visibly like you get really bad feelings how this person would treat the rest of your team, and you have really good feelings on the one that's a notch lower on the talent thing, you're probably going to see the lower skilled person get on the team, because the thing you don't want is someone to come in and poison your team with toxicity, with a huge ego, or just very nastiness. It's a force unmultiplier. It's a force divider, or whatever you want to
Exactly.
call it, right?
It's like a
And so
one
that's
third.
basically it. Get those soft skills. Treat people like other people. Treat them with respect.
I think
So
that's been a
that's a big
pretty
one.
big theme through the summit this year is just like learning and developing those soft skills because games as an industry are inherently collaborative in a way that
Yeah,
other industries might not be.
yeah.
And like
And
you
it's a
said,
creative environment too. So you're on a really difficult, we take a high level creativity, we have ever changing technology, ever changing audience tastes, and we all love making games. And, the money is good or not, depending on,
yeah.
what your life experience is. And so you have that pressure to be highly creative in an ever changing thing. And it's the pressure and the stress is there. And good teammates make it 100%, whether you're going to have a good time or bad time. Is if you get good teammates, you're going to have a good time making that. Bad teammates, you're not going to have a good time making that. And so really it's soft skills. And then I think the other one, without going into particulars on, of course, UX, you got to know Figma and these kind of things. Game design, you really should, really do some scripting, and know an editor really well and stuff like that. I would say, above that is the people skill, and then also the ability to learn. And this is where college students have an innate advantage. You have documented proof that you showed up regularly and did things that you otherwise would prefer not to do. Like I'm in a managerial accounting class right now in my MBA. I don't care for accounting. I just
Yeah.
don't, right? And but I'm showing up every day. I'm working hard to do it. And as a hiring manager, seeing that somebody has done this, has showed up, and has completed these things, learning new things and stuff like that, guess what? That's what's waiting for you at the job. You're going to be learning new things. You're going to be having to show up every day and work hard. Um, and so seeing that college students have done that, it's a big deal for me.
And as students, like our brains are kind of like still primed in learning mode. Like I
Yes.
just finished up with my master's at USC
Hmm.
and I like if I kind of closed myself off and was like, no, I know everything, I wouldn't have been able to get some really great
Oh yeah.
experiences that taught me so much.
Yeah.
And it's all you're always learning. Like it doesn't matter how
Yeah,
old you get.
be a lifelong student is really the biggest thing. And all, constantly seek out. If you come across something and you don't know much about it, that's a jackpot. That is just like awesome. Now you can go out and learn something new, and you never know how that's going to enrich in your life or your career. And so, because especially with game design, you never know when some good 15th century knowledge will come in handy or something, or you know, uh, you, you
Pentiment
never
just
know.
recently coming out and like that's a game where 15th century knowledge, very helpful for making that game.
Absolutely.
I found that you can make a game out of like honestly anything, even like
Yes.
really weird concepts. I've seen some, especially jam games, and I'm like, how did you come up with this idea? But then I play it and it's like, this is really good.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just gotta, the world itself is just a really incredible place filled with just really great things to discover and stuff like that. And I think games themselves, to get into a bit of the ludology aspect of it, is we're always trying to resimulate our environment and game plan things. And what if this happened, and what if that happened, and more the comfort food of stuff of I know exactly how this works, and I just want to do it a bunch because I'm comfortable doing it and stuff like that. I mean, that's really expresses a lot of games in there. And so the wider your portfolio of experiences and knowledge is going to help you out a lot with that. And I think that leads me into the whole look, if your life is work, you are seriously missing out on several things. And so, tr- you know, try to find a place that does not work you to death with overtime, and go out. your urge when you first get in the industry is put in a lot of hours on your own, unrequested, and really prove that you are in it and that you work hard and stuff like that. There's little payoff. That's low return on investment on that. As a hiring manager for quite a few years, I'd rather have somebody just work, 40 hours a week.
Mhm.
Just give me 8 hours where you're working, not watching videos or loafing and stuff. But at 5 p.m., just go and see a movie, go out and take a walk or go out with friends and stuff. Because the next day you're going to be so much better mentally prepared for a new day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like it's one of the things of school doesn't really have an off switch in the way
Yeah.
that work does. Like you're kind of going through a capstone. There were times where I would get a message at like 11 p.m. as I
Yeah.
was getting ready for bed, and I was like, I do have to respond to that. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's
if
different. Like, absolutely have a rule that you will not look at email or Slack or anything from work after work. Like it really can wait. And they have your emergency number if it is a truly emergency.
definitely
Yeah.
I think that's really important for people to hear, especially as they enter the workforce of just don't burn yourself out because
Yeah.
that's gonna hurt everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to kind of expand on the question of students' portfolios and ask
Sure.
what are some pieces that you'd want to see. And I imagine this also varies, like you said, from discipline to discipline. UX designers would probably want Figma, but in your areas of design, what do you think you would personally like to see?
Yeah. I do the ones I like the most with applicants is where I can actually go up, download their game, and play their game. Like if you are way ahead, if I can do that, extra credit for if you have your own blog or website that talks about what you did for that and why.
Mhm.
There's some of the ones I was just like, oh, we got to hire this person because I saw what they did and they blogged about how and why they did it. Like it really gives you a sneak peek into what your experience working with them is going to be. How do they think and stuff like that. And look, what I'm not looking for is a bunch of experts with tons of experience and stuff like that. I hire people out of college and with no experience. The great thing is I don't have to unteach and recover some bad habits that another studio may have forced upon you. And so, what you have is somebody, willing to learn the way to do things that I like to do them, that, potentially very eager to get in and just expand their knowledge on what the craft of game design and development actually is. And so yeah, if again, just make games as if you have no choice in the matter. Just keep on making games as if you're compelled, and then have access for me to see why did you make these choices? What was your progress in this? And then what did other people think about it? And again, good old games, itch.io, all these other ones that are friendly to, not the big companies where, hey, 200 people played my game and they said these things about them. And I'm using
Mhm.
that feedback for my next game to do X, right? That's huge for me. Otherwise, yeah, I do, for the more dry stuff, make sure you know how to use Unreal or Unity. I'm very pro Godot. I
Mhm.
think open source is the future. Just looking at the history of Blender, I remember when it came out because I'm
Oh
old,
yeah.
and it just steadily year over year getting better and better. And now I would be hard pressed to say why you wouldn't use Blender, which is free and stuff like that. So Godot's pretty cool. But yeah, one of those major engines and know how to do it. I think scripting, C sharp is my favorite. Python's great too. Just knowing your way around that is a big plus as well. So those are the big ones, and then it really breaks down. I think most design could use just at least passing knowledge with level editing.
Mhm.
So go in there and learn how to brush some terrain and some of the principles behind that. YouTube's got a lot of great, just, I hungrily go out and just, this is what I think of level design, right?
Yeah.
And seek those.
And there's so many good for level design resources like Architecture as Level Design. I
Oh
believe
yeah,
there was a really good book that got recommended for it. Um,
absolutely.
and just I Godot, I've used it before. already getting some really good improvements. Like as a 2D engine, if a game is like purely 2D, I would probably look more to Godot,
Yeah.
especially um especially as a uh especially in terms of like game jam games. I'm like, I don't need to download the Unity version
Absolutely.
2022 for this. Um, so I agree wholeheartedly in terms of just, and also I agree wholeheartedly. Its scripting is more like Python, which is probably better for people who don't want to necessarily dive into programming.
Hmm.
But I also am personally more, Python is too relaxed for me as a computer science graduate.
Yes, yes.
There are times when I'm like,
It's a little the white space creeps me out and all this kind of stuff.
oh
And
yeah,
yeah, I'm
I,
just I prefer C sharp and all things, you know.
I've done so much C sharp in the past couple of years too that I'm like, what do you mean I don't have to put a semicolon? Like you can tell when I'm going to Python that I'm like a C++ C sharp programmer because you'll see me like to put a semicolon, be like, wait, no, backspace
Yeah,
while
I
I'm
still think
programming.
Python is great. It's like I need to whip something together and there's modules left and right that'll do most of the work for me. And so, it's got that speed and flexibility, but C sharp is where the big work is.
It
Yeah,
is a great tool. I prefer C sharp.
sure, of course.
For our next question, I'd like to ask, what are new designers often unprepared for when they are getting into the industry, whether that be lining up the first indie contract or landing a position at a more established studio like Respawn, like EA?
Hmm. Oh man, I mean, this has changed so much over the years. I don't have really one answer to this. Um, I think with all of us, there's that whole, you're when you get hired, and again, you're gonna be prepared to apply a lot, do a lot of interviews, and just keep on doing that until you actually land something. And while you're interviewing, make sure you continue to make games, right? There should be nothing between you and making a game. I think once somebody is hired, there's that, we call it drinking from the fire hose. There's just so much information that's thrown at you. This company likes to do things this way. All the stuff like, do you sign up for a 401k? What the hell's a 401k? And all this, health
Yeah,
benefits and stuff.
the life
So it's
stuff.
it's a lot, right? And so I think um, I don't think you can prepare for that. I think the biggest thing I'd recommend is just give yourself a break, try to pace yourself. No one expects you to get everything in the first week. Like,
Mhm.
just remove that. All you need to do is just try hard and stuff like that. Make sure you're doing your best, asking questions. And this is probably the biggest one that I see with the people new to the industry is they're afraid to ask questions or afraid to ask help because they think it's a sign of weakness and inexperience and stuff like that. We already know that. We already know that you have no experience and we are all weak, right? And so you
Yeah,
need to get over that and, open yourself up a little bit, be a little bit vulnerable. And, when you hear an acronym and you have no idea what the hell is that referring to, raise your hand and say, sorry, I don't know what that means. Fill me in and just try not to do it with every single minute or anything, but raise your hand. That's a big one that I see a lot of people new to the industry is just they don't ask for help, they don't ask for clarity and stuff, they just silently suffer thinking that they're an imposter. They should know this. No, you shouldn't. No, of course you shouldn't know this hidden knowledge that was only developed at that studio that even me 30 years doing this, 31 years now, I'm a bundle of questions when I come in,
right.
especially with acronyms or monikers and other things that, people assume that everybody should know or don't realize that people don't know. You have to remind them, just like, hey, walk me through that, or why are you doing it this way? Because I'm used to doing it other ways, another one. So yeah, prepare, raise your hand. You're surrounded by other people who also don't think that they belong there, that they are an imposter waiting to be discovered. That's how everybody is. If you're any good, that's how you feel. If you feel like you're the smartest person in the room or that you've got it all figured out, that's a huge red flag. You need to start, that means you're incredibly biased and probably
Yeah.
not going to do so well. Yeah.
I think that like willingness to learn and just I see what you mean about like we had to talk about the about imposter syndrome at the engineering
Yeah.
panel as well of just like it's really easy to make your to feel like you're out of place,
Yeah.
especially if you're a student and just getting into the industry. But everybody's learning. Everybody's acronyms are like sometimes my death knell of just somebody will say an acronym and just assume that and then carry on. And I'll be like, hang on. Let's step back a second. What
Absolutely.
what does that mean?
Yeah. It's one of those things. I mean, programming certainly, but it does apply to all the other disciplines. You know, the more you know and the more you realize you don't know is,
Exactly.
it's just you get exposure to how much is actually out there. It's kind of terrifying how much there is to actually learn, and no one is going to learn everything. And so you have to kind of pick your fights. And in that context, I think, as a boss and a manager, the only time I'm frustrated with someone, and it's not a huge one, but it is a little annoying, is when you say, here, do this thing. You got 2 weeks. And they get stuck in like the third day and they don't say anything. And then it's
Hmm.
the day before delivery and they say, by the way, I'm stuck in step 3 out of 20. You're like, you could have asked this. I could have unblocked you. I could
At
have
any
said
point.
something way back when there was still time to do it. So again, raise your hand when you're stuck, raise your hand when you need help and stuff like that. Because I can deal with that. I could be like, oh yeah, I didn't explain that right. Or, here, just a 5-minute call, and now you can get back on track. If it gets towards the deadline and if you procrastinated and stuff like that, and just been too scared of doing it, now it's blown. Now we're all
Mhm.
behind. Now the whole team is probably going to have a tougher time, in the future, because you just didn't deliver your part, when you should have opened your mouth a little bit and say, hey, I need help.
Absolutely. Just that throws timelines. I did production on my capstone last year, and there were times where somebody would tell me something like, "Oh, I wasn't able to do this," and I would be like, "Okay, why didn't you tell me this earlier? I could have like
Yeah,
either helped you or
we
asked
could have
somebody
dealt
to
with it.
help."
Yeah. And
Um,
I guarantee you raising your hand back then would have been less of a hit of my esteem of you than how you're
exactly.
coming off right now, right? Yeah.
Now the conversation is very much like what, and now I'm like, now you're rushing to figure out like,
Now it's
okay, what do we
crisis
do
mode.
now?
Yeah.
Um, versus like at the time, it's like maybe it's annoying or maybe it's like, okay, that's like unfortunate, but here's how it works.
Well, and we all get stuck. We all have
Yeah.
design block or programming block, or just times where, your normal functions just fail.
Hmm.
We've all been there. Just that's why we're a team instead of a
Yeah.
collection of individuals.
That's a great way to put it. Like nobody is in this alone,
Yeah.
especially at like no matter how big or small the studio is, unless it is literally I can only think of like one game that was developed by one person,
Yeah.
the original Axiom Verge, and that took like 12 years to make.
Yes. It's half of what I like about this industry is doing very difficult things with teammates.
Mhm.
There's winning on your own and then winning as a team. And when you win as a team, and again, if it's a team of people you enjoy being around, whatever good feelings, it's just multiplied. We did
Absolutely.
it is a much better statement than I did it.
And like you mentioned earlier, that's why team fit and like soft skills are so important to make it a
Absolutely.
multiplier and not a divider, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is a question that kind of this question that I have about just payment.
Hmm.
How can prospective designers negotiate for payment?
Hmm.
Because that's really something that you do not get prepared for and
Sure.
can really be like probably scary for people. I know that was
Yeah.
scary for me.
I mean, I think culturally we're just instructed not to talk about money, and stuff like that. And I think my personal experience, my personal story is my life changed after I had the realization that nobody really understands what you want, until you tell them. Nobody understands your expectations until you tell them. They can disagree, right? But if you're just like, oh, they will notice, they will read my mind, they will know what I expect to be paid or that I do want a promotion. Oh, here's a big piece of advice. Something that turns people off when you get hired is, in the first few months of being hired, when you're already talking about when can I be promoted, that's a big
Oh,
no.
okay.
Like, you're hired to do a job, spend a year doing your best to do that job. And after that first yearly review, that's when you could say, hey, I've been doing this year. I love it. I want to see what the road ahead is to get to the next level because I love leveling up. And so, but if you, I've had people in our first one-on-one, they had just been hired 2 weeks ago. We're having our one-on-one. They're talking about what's the, you know, yeah, I really want to be in this position as soon as possible. How do we go? It's just like, I don't even know you. I don't
Mhm.
even know if you're appropriate for that. Are you an axe murderer? I don't know, and so, just cool it a little bit. Go in there. They've hired you for a specific position. Go and master it. Everything that you're doing, you should be 100% attention on that thing and doing it well. So All right, so back to the original question. So I think it's always fair to ask what is the range of pay for the position that you're in. I think anyone who can't give you that is a red flag, right?
Mhm.
So, and in California, before you even advertise for a position, they have to include what is the pay range for that position. A lot of people, especially with experience, be like, "Oh, the range is 80 to 100,000 a year, right?" And so I've got a lot of experience. I'm going to go in at 100,000. That's what I'm going to ask for. It's just like, well, no, because no one will ever do that. Because what do you do after year one? They literally can't pay you more. You are losing money because of inflation at that point. So they always try to bring you in maximum around, honestly, if you get within 5% of that maximum, that's an outlier, right?
Mhm.
So somebody who's overqualified for something, you should expect to get, if the max is 100, 90-ish is a realistic expectation because year after year they have to give you, that if you do well without a full promotion and a whole new pay scale, which is expensive for a company to do and make those changes, you have to have some room to grow in that point. So start with asking what is the pay range. And look, as a new graduate, you're going to be at the bottom of that range. That is
Mhm.
the way of things. Okay. And so each year, what you should be asking now, a lot of people get confused on the relationship with a manager. The the person being managed, the individual contributor, IC, their duty and job and social contract is you work hard on the things that are put in front of you as part of your job, right? A lot of people forget the other half of that is your manager has a very serious duty. In fact, I would consider it a critical duty to grow the person and care for that person in your charge. You're not in charge of them, they're in your charge.
Mhm.
You are on the hook, just like kids. You got to grow them up. You were there to make them into functioning good adults, right? Every new person in this industry, the manager should be thinking the ultimate goal is to get this person to at least my level, perhaps beyond. How are we going to do that? What do you need
Right.
to work on? What are you doing well so you do more? What aren't you doing enough that you need to start doing more of so you can start increasing? You need to invest in this person. And with that naturally comes the money. Okay. So when you're in those reviews, or after a while, once you get to know each other and they know how hard you're working and how you're like understanding the position, then you could start saying, someday I do want to go up to the next level. Let's talk about that. What are the skills and achievements I need to earn to get to that next level? And so on. Now, on the subject of money, it really is up to a lot of people's discretions, impressions, never perfect. People will have favorites and other biases. And all you got to do is just, you got to advocate. You got to say, hey, I really want to do this. What's it going to take? When you're in a position of saying, here's what I want, and a question of how do I achieve that, you kind of disarm the conversation instead of saying, give me a 5% range. You say, what's it going to take for me to get a 5% raise? Right. And so, well, here's what it would take. And they're like, great, I will start doing these. It's not a guarantee or promise, but it shows that you're invested in this. You're going to treat it seriously. So that's some of my advice.
I feel like that also kind of like gives the manager actionable items to give you, and then they can keep a lookout of like, hey, I told this person to do this. This here is a report of what they did. And like you said,
Absolutely.
I think that's really important of just the manager is also there to help you. They're not like trying to
Not just
they're there to help
bosses.
you.
Yeah,
Because sometimes it can feel different, but at the end of the day, we're trying to make a good game
absolutely.
and trying to advance your career
Yeah,
from just like from being a student to being able to kind of like start at those medium level roles and start at those senior level roles as well.
absolutely.
I'd like to ask about your time as a design director.
Mhm.
Is that position um more of like product is it like a mix of production and boots on the ground design? Is it more design?
Yeah, so it's nuanced. So I in my course I've been a design director. I think the first place was on at Red 5 Studios working on a game called Firefall, big open world
Mhm.
shooter with jetpacks and
Yes.
stuff. And you know, going in there, and then I've been a design director at Wargaming in Seattle, and then again in my current position. And so the common thread with a lot of these, because it does vary by company what the expectations are, but generally the nature of the work is you are the pinnacle of that discipline, at least for your team. You know, if it's a small enough studio, then for the studio. What your job is not to make all the design decisions. What you are there to do is properly align and clarify the vision to all the designers. So you are the beacon, you are the lighthouse or that end goal. You know, the person that says, we're going this way, this at the very end of it, we're going to deliver this kind of experience, and then ensure that everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction. Okay. So I do very little, I don't make a lot of check-ins in Perforce anymore. It's kind of sad. You know, I feel like I've hung up my designer spurs or whatever we actually have. And instead I'm in the business of clarifying and aligning and saying, hey, this is where we need to go, and here is why, and here's how we get there. So let's go. So you become that, you know, the force multiplier, you become that guide and you know, shepherd almost of we're going this way. And so you know, specifically looking at design, so I, you know, you do things like, is the level design appropriate for the combat style that we have? Is combat and meta systems like progression and other stuff actually working together? Does that feel like it's a harmonious relationship with the with all our loops and stuff like that? So it's really that eye in the sky that makes sure that everything is clicking together, that everything is aligned towards the game we want to make. And you know, and then of course, yeah, of course, you do critique, you do evaluate design as they see it. When people get stuck, you unstuck them. You know, it's kind of mentorship, almost like thing. Say, hey, try this instead of that, because you know, maybe you've been there yourself. So that's a lot of the what the design director does. I've also been a creative director
Mhm.
at Disney. That's where you start having a strong foot into things like narrative, art, a lot of stuff beyond design. And so you need to make sure that those things are also well, you know, working well with the overall game vision, as well as with design. Make sure that design is being equal partners with your artists and audio specialists and such, to make sure it's a one holistic experience. You know, I was talking to my friend last night about Ori, you know, about how it's really a masterclass of how everything works together so well. There's not an out of place feeling in that game, you know.
Yeah.
And so you know, just games like that really shows that when you have strong alignment on a team, everybody knows what you're going after and what kind of experience you're trying to do. When the artists and designers are on the same page, even though their jobs are very different, that's when you get those kind of experiences. And so the creative director oversees that. And then I was also a game director for Rocket League for 5 years. And so the big thing with that one is now you're in charge of the entire project. You are basically, this thing has to not only be design healthy and art healthy, but it has to be business healthy and product healthy. And so, yes, I am now working with producers very closely. We have to, you know, what are the things that are important to be on a milestone, like content deliveries, battle passes, whatever, and what is stuff that no, that's going to wait until it's done, like a new feature. Like never force out a feature just because it has a deadline, unless you
Right.
have to. There's no other choice. Because what you want is that first experience of that player with that new feature is to be solid, it's to be good and stuff like that. It's much harder to fix something that's already out in the wild than take another, you know, few weeks or months to make sure it's not a disaster. So those are the kind of differences between those. I would say that the more you understand about production as a designer, the better your design is going to be, because production's all about how do we make this thing and make sure it's staying on track and achieving the goals that we need. And I'm a firm believer that there's no good design without constraints, right? If
Yeah,
you are
definitely.
given infinite runway, you're just going to go in circles forever because there's always a better idea. But you know, constraints means no, you got to make a choice, and you got to make a choice based on your best understanding of the problem space. And this is where producers are your partner. They'll be like, hey, we don't have infinite time on this nor infinite resources, and we think it should be put together in this order, program wise. So anyway, a lot of thoughts there.
think that was really insightful and also just kind of like it makes a lot of I agree wholeheartedly on like games are made from their constraints more than necessarily their
Mhm.
freedoms because you can keep on. There were times when I was working on my capstone where I was like, we can keep on working on this feature until it's like perfect,
Yeah,
or we can ship the game.
yeah,
We have
absolutely.
two options here.
Yes.
And because of that, we made decisions and that ended up making our game really fun.
Yeah.
Um, so definitely like that makes a lot of sense, and it makes as a design director especially, and with you
Mhm.
knowing the differences. This actually segues us well into this question. This will be our last question from this. We'll have a few questions from the Q&A from
Mhm.
Twitch chat and Discord, but if we have time, then we'll come back to this
Cool.
sheet. But this question was, have you made design decisions when balancing your own creative vision and what the studio needs, and how was that process like?
All the time. I mean, that's the name of the game, especially on a director level. I think yeah, a lot of people read conflict in that when it shouldn't be. Part of my job as a director is to seek out and make sure I understand what the studio needs from the product. I also really should be an expert in what is the franchise brand and IP, right?
Mhm.
And like on Rocket League, man, it's a very unusual game, right? There's a lot of vibes going on there that are not common to other games, and so I didn't want to be the game director that would come in and old school vinyl records, the
The
needles,
record scratch, yeah.
you know. No,
Just
no, man, you got to continue that vibe, and that's the whole reason I love that game ever since I played it. I think in late alpha or early beta, and so it just had such a spectacular vibe. And so the studio had these goals of number one, we need to maintain this feeling and appreciate our players. It's been one of the most player facing places I've ever been where they really valued their players. The players have given them everything, all their success, all everything and stuff like that. And they wanted to keep that going and make sure they're respecting their players. And so the studio was basically job number one is to keep these people rewarded, keep them topmost in your mind, and continue giving them the experiences that they showed up in the first place for. It's okay to do new things and stuff like that, but certainly make sure you're keeping them instead of money or whatever, at the forefront. And so yeah, so repeat that for wherever you're at. Understand what your studio needs to do. It is a business after all. So, gross, it does ask people for money, either through box sales or free to play microtransactions or something. But honestly, even the more bigger places, they do care about the players. They
yeah.
know, they could have chosen many things other than game development to fund a company on, right? And there's easier industries. I guarantee you
Yes.
that. And so I think even the most cold-hearted, perception of a CEO and other stuff, there's probably still a reason why this person is doing what they're doing. And
Mhm.
so, go in and figure out what this product needs to do, why, what's the where it's coming from, what is the history of the products that has been going on. Like at Respawn, you have this wonderful, rich history of these Titanfalls and Apex and stuff, and you want to keep that going, man. I just want to expand that universe and tell more people about that stuff. And so now, as a design director, I could start going, okay, so I know what the studio needs. Here's how this product, at least the design aspect, it can deliver on those needs with the best experience possible for players.
Mhm.
And so, sure, we're gonna expand this wonderful world, and whether it's Legends or whatever, right? And so yeah, you really just have to have insight of those things. Now, with a lot of that, the question, especially when you're lower in the company, it always feels like, oh, the big bad company is telling us to do these things, and we just want to make games and stuff like that. It's like, no, they're your teammates too. Your CEO
Mhm.
is your teammate. You're all there for the same reason, as making those games that players will love. And so have some empathy for them too. I know they have a lot more power than you, but they still deserve your empathy. Why are they telling you to do that stuff? Why do they have these goals? Right. Part of that is to keep you employed and able to pay your rent.
Right.
So give them a break.
Like you said, it's just there's a lot easier industries to make money in that aren't games. I'm
Yeah.
from the Bay Area originally, so I've seen some of my friends and
Oh
like
yeah.
they'll be like, "Oh, making games seems so easy," and I'm like, "No, no, it's not."
Oh
The fact that you're
man.
saying that to me, I have opinions now.
Yeah. It's, I mean, every industry has its own ups and downs and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And what's funny, just yeah, make sure you have a lot of friends outside of the gaming industry, because a lot of the stuff that you think is uniquely horrible about your industry, no, no, that's what we're all going through. We're
Yeah.
all going through that, right? It's a
People can
human experience.
commiserate. You can commiserate with people together.
Absolutely.
I found that sometimes that is the best way to bond with somebody is just
Yep.
commiserate about something
Oh
together.
yeah.
We'll move on to some audience questions, and if
Cool.
we have some time, we'll come back to the sheet. But for our first
Sure.
audience question from Peter, he asks about linking design documents to tasks that you can actionably work on.
Hmm.
How is that process? What is that like, especially as like design director we talked about earlier?
Sure. Well, so there's some nuance in this. The first question is, where are you at in development? Because design documentation is one of those things that are highly subject to, are you in the early inception of the product and prototypes? Like, having a lot of documentation during prototypes just mean you're going to be throwing a lot away, a lot of documentation. You're there to explore and stuff like that. So the focus of your documentation should be very high level. Like, what are the questions we should be asking? And how about are we going to go about that? It's very agile, right?
Mhm.
And so at some point you get into, prototype, you're basically figuring out, well, what do we need to figure out? The inception or incubation part is this game worth making? Is there something here that we should invest with a few more people? Prototyping, you go on, you're building toys and trying to prove hypotheses, and he's like, what if we did this and this, right? And so, but you're doing it in very horrible ways, right? Stuff that you hopefully will never ship because it's like so duct taped together. It is horrible, and you feel guilty and all kinds of horrible things,
Yeah,
because
I've
you
been
know
there.
that when you go into pre-production, like, we know this is good. And so how do we want to build it robustly, right? How do we want to make it where we built one level, and it's like barely hanging together, or this combat system is just the worst of all hacks, so on and so forth, right? And so pre-production is where you figure out, well, here's how we're going to build it. And then production is the part where you're just doing things. Everything's been figured out and it's just a bunch of work to do. So when you're in that pre-production phase and moving into production, that's when you're documenting, right? This is where you're just like, this is where we need to actually get real with a lot of the stuff. How does this work? How does it connect to this other systems? Now, a lot of the methods I like to use, I mean, Confluence is great. Google Docs and all this kind of stuff, and Miro are my big
Yes.
ones, right? I prefer Jira, as far as task tracking. So
Mhm.
honestly, as a designer, the real answer is, rely on your producers to stitch that stuff together. Just worry about your document, learn how all those systems work if you do want to link together and stuff like that. But you know, what you don't want to do, even in production, is have like this huge 300-page design document or equivalent online that somebody has to wade through. With every page of documentation, that just means a certain percent of developers won't read it, and it
Yes.
gets more and more likely, right? And so only enough is the answer, right? And definitely nesting it. Like, if you have like a one pager that everyone should read, but unless you're implementing it, you don't need to read the details, right? So link, break your document, your one pager, into these big sections, and if you click on the link, you can actually go in and see, well, what's deep about that system. And so I think the last thing I'd say about documentation is that there's a difference. Designers should be documenting heavily. Most of your documentation should only be viewable by you. It's journaling. you know it's basically because you're going to lose track. You're going to be doing multiple things. Why were you setting up your economy like that? What were your thoughts early on? What did you think your goals were? When you fully design out a system or feature, that's mainly for you to refer to. And for you to actually work through a problem, just like on paper, doing complex math, I'm reaching for a pencil and a calculator, showing my work so I understand what I'm doing. Design documentation is the same. Nobody needs to see my work, right?
Right.
And if you're an engineer implementing my documentation or my design, maybe some documentation. Usually listen to your engineer on what they prefer for the documentation because they're your they're the reader of your work, and so you should be sensitive to their needs.
That's a super helpful and like insightful point of just those documents. They're probably going to just you're going to be going through so many revisions that
Yeah.
even writing game design documents, like writing narratives, is 90%, 99% rewriting.
Yeah. And
Um,
honestly, I mean, you're going to get a lot more out of a one-page document that goes over the big stuff and then
mhm.
having that meeting or conversation with the artists and engineers you'll be working with. Talk about it. They need to know where you're coming from or what your design is trying to do. And here's the great thing, especially engineers will be able to say, well, if you want to go after that, why don't we just do this? Like they will
Mhm.
have key insights, very creative as too, because engineering is a creative pursuit. Make no mistake. You have to get crafty on how to solve some of those engineering problems. And again, they could be working anywhere and they're choosing a game company, right?
Yes.
So involve them early as you can on figuring out what the design should be.
One of my favorite experiences as an engineer is like having a designer talk to me, be like, "Oh, this feature seems really hard," and I look at it and I'm like, "Oh, that's like an afternoon's work. That's
Oh,
not bad at all."
yeah, it's the things you think should be easy and quick are often impossible, and the things that are impossible are probably already done, and they just need to
Yeah,
flip a switch, you
I
know.
put this toggle over here. It's already there.
Yeah,
Don't
just
worry about
let the engineers tell you what you can do with your engine. I mean, swear to God, yeah.
it. We have a question from Megna, one of the other SGDA officers. She's asking, should you present this documentation in a portfolio or present other things if you're a designer?
If you're trying to get work, yeah, expose it, but have mercy on your readers who often don't have a lot of time. Start with that top layer. Here's the gist of what we're talking about. Here's the major points and stuff like that. And let them, the delve down behavior. Ooh, this is catching my eye. I want to know a lot more about that. And that'll take you into maybe 10 pages of detail onto said thing if it requires that, right? When you're throwing complete books at people, they'll be like, no time,
Yeah.
and also it's not relevant usually and stuff like that. So present that top layer with detail below if the reader so desires to go seek it.
Awesome. Her secondary question was, as a veteran of the industry, and this is a really good one, what is the biggest change you've seen in the industry
Yeah.
that new and entry-level people should be aware of?
Oh my goodness. I got stories, many of them not relevant. I mean, I my first game was in DOS. That's how long I've been
Oh my
doing it.
God.
And I think the first biggest things was the industry becoming a professional industry. It used to be absolute Wild West back in the mid 90s, right? And it really started turning into a profession in the 2000s, where you actually saw some serious minded, we are here to make games to make a lot of money off of it instead of, hey, I like games and, this beats working at 7-Eleven or something, right? And so that often was the equation back then. But I think some of the biggest ones were going digitized. When game development really changed with Steam.
Mhm.
When all of a sudden, this is why E3 is no longer really a thing anymore. E3 was where game studios and game companies would have direct access to the people who would sell their games in brick and mortar places like Walmart. You would go and kiss their ring, and basically like, what's it going to take to get my game, my box game on the third or fourth shelf? You want that eye space.
Yes.
And what deals do you need to do? What sales do we calculate if you do so? Because what's in it for them and stuff like that. And now Steam is just like, hey, and now Apple Store and all this kind of stuff is just like, what is a box? Why would you need a box to deliver a game? That seems crazy now. That was a huge one. Changes everything how you approach game development. As far as now, we can really go easy on the people trying to figure out stuff like supply chain logistics and stuff like
Yes.
that and deliveries. And The entire first run of a game by Sierra Online was lost because they had packed everything into one truck and the truck actually fell into a lake. And so the game that they were trying to deliver was literally delayed by a long time, right? That's how it used to be. So now it's digitized and all this kind of stuff. For us, though, in our current time, it's the COVID, man. That
Mhm.
was
Right.
just because free to play is now here. Now it's normal and stuff like that. So that was the last major beat. But COVID, all of a sudden, you can make games anywhere. And
Mhm.
before it was just like, well, you better move to San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles, and a handful of other places, um, or you're not going to work in games. Now, and this is starting to change back the other way, of you could really be anywhere as long as you get internet connection, you're in business. And there's various reasons for the return of office, in my opinion, is starting to get on there. And so I think the next big impending one is AI.
Mhm.
And so I've got a lot of crazy opinions on AI both ways. But I think that's a big one. My recommendation to everyone watching this and listening is, um, AI is a tool that you really should get good in. You absolutely, this is not cheating or anything. It's just basically like, this is one of your major tools in your tool chest, and you should know how to effectively use it, know its place, know what it's good at and what it's not good at. It's not good at many things, and
Yes.
I'm not in fear of the robots taking over the world. At least for now. But it's a handy tool,
Mhm.
and so learn how to use it. So
That's a
those are some of the biggest changes is just not having to go into the office, and then this new powerful little tool that we have available.
definitely. And I know with like like return to office of just like it being kind of it's very much in flux of like some studios are doing it, some studios aren't.
Yeah,
And I know also one of the things that I've seen is that in terms of layoffs, like it's a lot harder when you have a return to office and
yeah,
then you move to a place and all of a sudden layoffs happen and it's like, what now?
yeah.
But when it's a remote position, that's one of the big advantages of it is that that fear, that uncertainty isn't there anymore. And that's one of the unfortunate things about return to office. But
Right. Yeah,
I
and
know,
that's why you have to move to these major hubs. I mean, when I started game development, I was in Eugene, Oregon. I was very much a one developer studio house, and if you lost your job there, either you had to exit the industry or you had to move. And so
right.
I moved to Seattle because I wanted to buy a house and not have to move because Seattle, my God, your commute's the same even, right? And
Yeah.
so and it's less of a deal now. I think it's going to be over the next couple of years. You're going to see more return to office because
Mhm.
a lot of the benefits are undeniable. And so it's just the way that human beings are, we're wired. And honestly, in a very creative endeavor, either I could stop by your desk and have a 5 minute discussion at the drop of a hat, or I can schedule a half-hour meeting on Zoom where 90% of what I want to say at best is going to get through.
Right.
Yeah, but I love my home office. Like this is where I want to be. But man, you do see the benefits going in and working shoulder to shoulder with people. Plus, I miss developers. I mean,
Mhm.
we're a very unique kind of person in being able to work and just hang out together is amazing. I just love talking to developers, love goofing off with them. We got weird humors and the variety of people I'd never meet otherwise. I get a chance to get to know and hear their viewpoints, and discover great things about them in person that you just don't get on Zoom.
I think the narrative panel yesterday, I mentioned how like GDC is my favorite time of the year. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's the only place where I don't have to explain that game design is not game art
Yes.
to people.
Absolutely. Oh, you're a programmer is always when people say that. Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
the game industry. Oh, it's only programmers.
It's like,
Okay.
no, 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 no,
Oh,
no,
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 it's
no.
many of us here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think our capstone team had like 20, more than half the team was artists
Yeah,
because we collaborated with other schools.
absolutely.
Um, I think with that, we're coming up on time. So thank you so much for coming by to speak with us. Thank you for answering all of our questions. Um, we are we have a couple more showcases left for the rest of the day to keep an eye out. Thank you so much for coming by to speak with us.
Absolutely. Good luck, everyone, and go out, keep making games. Just do it.